is Harold Mendelson, and today I will be presenting the amazing story of William Thomas Jones and the Tyson and Jones Buggy Company. Before I get started, let me give you a little educational background on myself. I attended West Virginia University at Parkersburg and earned a Associate's of Arts degree in business. And then I moved to Columbus, Ohio, where I attended Franklin University and achieved a Bachelor of Science degree in Computer Management and Finance with honors. I then enrolled in the MBA program and completed that and was awarded an MBA. Enough about me, let me get into what this presentation is about. This is about a man named William T. Jones and what would eventually be known as the Tyson and Jones Buggy Company. In Carthage, North Carolina, which is about 60-70 miles southwest of Raleigh. It is the county seat of Moore County. And in addition to that, it is also would be the headquarters and factory of the Tyson and Jones Buggy Company. I will present the four principal owners or partners of what would end up being known as the Tyson and Jones Buggy Company, and then I will intermix with that the history of the Tyson and Jones Buggy Company and also explain what happened to the buildings after the company went bankrupt in 1929.
Thomas Bethune Tyson I was born in 1813 in Moore County, North Carolina. Tyson was married to Mary Jane Person on February 3, 1842 in Moore County. Mary Jane died on October 24, 1897. Eventually, he would bring his son, Lucien P. Tyson, into the mercantile company he started in 1841, located in Carthage, and later his grandson, T.B. Tyson II, into the company as well. The business continued to grow and prosper. When the plank road from Fayetteville to Salem, now Winston-Salem, going through Carthage, was completed in 1854, this mercantile business increased. T.B. Tyson I purchased the Sewell Brothers Company in 1856. Shortly afterwards, he would go into partnership with Alexander Kelly, forming the Tyson and Kelly Company. This partnership would continue until Kelly passed away in 1872. In 1857, on one of his many business trips to Fayetteville, he spoke with a man named Thomas W. Jones about coming to work for him as a buggy painter and foreman of the paint department in his buggy company in Carthage. This would be the beginning of a long and profitable partnership with Jones, which would last until his death in 1893. Between his mercantile business and the buggy company, he was also partners in other companies as well. He became a wealthy man. He built his home across the street from the courthouse on one side and from the buggy factory on the other, and moved it to another location on Dowd Street. Eventually, his grandson, T.B. Tyson II, would build his home on the same location. After Kelly's death, and Jones became a partner in 1859, which was able to purchase Kelly's share of the buggy company from his estate. The name of the buggy company was changed to Tyson and Jones Buggy Company. This would continue until T.B. Tyson I passed away on March 28, 1893. He left all the stock of his company to his grandson, T.B. Tyson II. After his widow's death in 1897, the house they lived in was vacant and remained so for many years. A developer bought the vacant home and property and eventually tore it down to build. Alexander Kelly was born on November 10, 1810. He was married to Sarah McLeod on February 12, 1839, and had 8 children. He started to build his home in 1838 and was completed in 1845. It was built on a hill overlooking his 3,000-acre plantation. The house still exists and remains in the Kelly family. He was sheriff of Moore County from 1840 to 1844, a North Carolina state senator in 1846, a North Carolina state representative in 1860, 1862, and 1870. His wife Sarah died on June 28, 1854, and Alexander Kelly died on May 1, 1872. His partnership in the Buggy Company was sold to T.B. Tyson I and W.T. Jones in 1873. W.T. Jones was born on August 8, 1833 in either Bladen or Cumberland counties. He was the son of Ambrose Jones, a slave owner, and one of his slaves. He was born as a slave. Not much more is known about W.T. Jones until the 1850 census, where he was listed in the Schedule L as a student. Schedule L, I believe, was used to list free or emancipated Negroes, and at the time in slaveholding states, blacks were either listed as free or emancipated Negroes or separately as slaves. In the census tabulating, slaves were only counted as 2/3 of a person for the census. In 1857, he was hired by T.B. Jones as a painter and head of the painting department. At the time, he was married to Sophia Isabella Hunsucker. The date of the marriage is unknown. Sophia died in Jonesboro on October 14, 1874. Sophia was a white woman, and at the time it was illegal to have a mixed marriage. So Jones would have had to register on the marriage license as a white. He was also listed in the 1860 to 1910 census as being white. Jones married for the second time to Florence Doherty at her home in Magnum, located in Richmond County. She, like Sophia, was a white woman. Florence died on January 6, 1839, in her home in Carthage. Jones was a partner, his main partner, in 1859, and at that time he was put in charge of the entire Buggy operation. He held that position until he died on November 29, 1910. In 1861, the Civil War began, and shortly afterwards, Tyson and Kelly Company shut down. Jones, like many of his Buggy Company employees who were of the eligible age to join the Confederate Army, and did so. He was given the rank of 3rd Lieutenant, Company C of the 35th North Carolina Infantry Regiment. In May 1864, Jones was promoted to 1st Lieutenant, and in June 1864, he and the rest of the surviving unit were captured near Petersburg, Virginia, and there sent to Fort Delaware, located on the Delaware River between Delaware and New Jersey. He was among the 1,200 Confederate POWs. As an officer, he was kept with the other officers. Going through the kitchen, he noticed there was a huge amount of potato peels and unused bread. He got to thinking that he could make moonshine. He requested to see the camp commander and asked if he could make and sell moonshine. The commander agreed, and he was given what he needed to make his moonshine. It was not listed if he started making the moonshine soon after he was placed in Fort Delaware or afterwards as a member of the Immortal 600 when he returned to Fort Delaware. Fort Delaware was not only a POW prison, it was also a staging area for Union troops to assemble and ship out to where they were needed. It was also a boot camp for Union Army recruits. At first he was selling his product to Union soldiers, but was given permission to go into town and sell it on Saturdays. He accumulated a large amount of money through this business. When the Union Army learned of how poorly the Confederates were treating the Union POWs, and most Union POW camps split the number of Confederate prisoners they had in half and put half of them on the same rations the Confederate Army was given to the Union POWs. Jones was one of those chosen. He became one of the Mortal 600. Besides being put on special rations, they were shipped to several different prisons in Savannah, such as Savannah, Georgia, Hilton Head, South Carolina, and South Point, North Carolina. And then he was returned to Fort Delaware near the end of the Civil War. He was released from Fort Delaware in 1865. By this time, he had accumulated over $3,000 from selling moonshine. Several of the POWs were in bad shape, so he hired buggies to travel to let all of the POWs from Carthage travel south in wagons instead of walking. Jones and the survivors of Fort Delaware reached Carthage, North Carolina, and Fort Delaware. When Jones and the survivors of Fort Delaware arrived at Carthage, they found once vibrant village quiet. Talking to people they met, they found out the people were desperate. There was no money, no jobs, nothing but despair. Jones went to see T.B. Tyson, and he wanted to know why the entire village was so depressed, and why wasn't the Buggy factory open. He received the answer that he was not expecting. There was no use of the money. Yankee money was in short supply, and without it, the Buggy Company could not reopen. When T.B. Tyson at first was told by Jones he had over $3,000 in Union currency and would invest it all to reopen the factory, Tyson couldn't believe what he had just heard. When he saw the Yankee money Jones had brought home, he realized he was able to restart Tyson and Jones Buggy Company. With the influx of money, the reopened factory allowed men to gradually return to work. They would have money to take care of their families, fill their bellies, and put new clothes on their backs. It took some time, but the factory came back to life slowly. Factory employees back to work, the resumption of building buggies resumed. Carthage started to come back to life. Soon the buggies started to get built. It was slow at first. Customers had to be found. Soon the buggies started to roll off the assembly line, and the supply of buggies had to be sent to Bennettsville, South Carolina, a distribution point, and eventually business started to pick up. Orders for new buggies and requests to repair buggies, which also picked up. As with any uptick in the economy, the more stuff was being purchased, the more people were going back to work outside of the factory. Farmers were able to get their crops planted and harvested. This didn't happen overnight. It took a couple of years before everything was as it was before the Civil War. Jones and Florence Doherty were married on January 19, 1876 at her former home in Mangum, Richmond County, located in the North Carolina-South Carolina border, about 50 miles south of Carthage. She, like his previous wife, was white. Jones had been filling out the census questions since 1860 and was continued stating that he was white for the rest of his life. It is also stated that he was white on his marriage certificate. His first home was located on the factory property. The first floor contained his office, and he and his wife lived upstairs on the second floor. When he remarried, he and his wife lived in that residence until 1880, when he was able to move to his new house. It was located on McReynolds Street, a short walk from the factory. Behind his house was a deep creek bed, which was impossible to cross. Ever a thinking man, he had his workers build him a bridge across the creek, which reduced the amount of time it took him to arrive at work and return home every day.
Hello again. This segment of the presentation will deal with the John B. Tyson I and William T. Jones Buggy Company era. This is when one of the two partners ran the organization. On May 1st, 1872, Alexander Kelly passed away. A year later, both Tyson and Jones were able to purchase his share of the company from his estate. In 1875, with Jones running the day-to-day operations, he purchased a steam engine with a boiler and a water tank to be installed so that they could power the new power tools that were installed in the company. This converted from cutting and basically shaping and planing the woods down into doing everything by machine tools rather than by hand. This saved a lot of time and enabled them to make the buggies faster. With that time savings, they were also able to have more product to sell. This continued on, and the output of the buggies increased. It was 600, 800, and eventually would get up to as high as 3,000 a year. In 1878, there was a mass exodus of the shop foremans and some of the workers to leave the company and start their own. They felt that they would be able to get higher salaries from this new company. What happened then was that the new company was formed in Carthage, but in 1882 there was a massive fire in that company and destroyed the one building they had, and therefore the people who had left Tyson and Jones were now unemployed because the company they moved to was out of business. Not all, but many of them, with hat in hand, came back to reapply for jobs in the Tyson and Jones Buggy Company, and they were gladly allowed to rejoin. They may have not had the same positions they had before, and they may not have been foremen anymore, but they were back in working, and some of them actually got back into their old jobs eventually. Now this continued and improved basically operations. It was more efficient, but there was still one major problem: the marketplace. How did they get their built buggies to the marketplace? At the time there was no railroads in Carthage, so the only option they had was to hook up the buggies that they were going to be moving to for sale, or moving down to down to their display place they had, distribution place in Bennettsville, South Carolina. What this entailed is they would hook all the buggies together and have a team and a lead buggy, and this was done with William T. Jones. He actually went and moved it. Now initially the closest railhead was in Jonesboro, which is about 20 miles away, and this took a 2-day round trip to move the buggies over there, get them loaded on trains, and then move back to Carthage. In addition, it was worse with Bennettsville. That was 1 week each way. That was 2-week round trip, and that was done on a monthly basis. Well, this was taking up most of Jones's time. As you can see, he didn't have much time to run the day-to-day operation. So what he decided to do was to build a railroad. But in the process of that happening, a rail line was built again, and this time it stopped in Cameron, which is only 10 miles away. So this was basically a 1-day round trip, and it cut that part of the logistics of moving the buggies to the trains in half. But still, it took a lot of time, and plus there was always the possibility of damaging in transit. So then he really formulated to form a railroad, which he was able to do. He petitioned the county government up in Carthage, which was the county seat, to pass a bond issue, and in addition to that, businessmen also purchased some of the bonds, as well as himself. He was put as president of the railroad once it got started. The railroad was completed in 1878. Afterwards, this simplified the operation. The train actually was built and came right up to the front of the plant. This enabled them to just take the buggies and load them up on the train cars, and then they would proceed onward and would link up with other railroads and get them either sent down to Bennettsville in South Carolina or shipped to the customers wherever they purchased the buggies from. Now, this was the start of a revolution as far as Jones was concerned. The other thing that happened was in 1889, the business was doing so well that they incorporated and created shares. And both Jones and Tyson I were actually got an equal share of 290 shares. The remaining shares of the company were given to other executives. The shares were at a par value of $30 per share, and there were 1,000 shares issued. So it was a total of raising $30,000 in bond in funds. In March 28th, 1893, Tyson I passed away from a heart attack. As he was walking home from the office, he had a heart attack. They took him home, and he passed away the next day. He had a son named Lucien, who in turn had a son named Thomas B. Tyson II. Now, when it came time to inherit shares of Tyson and Jones, Lucien was bypassed and was given to his grandson. Now the reason for that was that Lucien wanted to remain in his father's mercantile business, and he also had built and was operating a hotel right across the street from the courthouse, and he wanted to pursue those assets, and he gladly allowed his son to continue operating, where he became vice president of Tyson and Jones Buggy Company. In 1895, Jones decided, and they had done in the past, was to enter exhibitions and exhibits. And there was an exposition down in Atlanta, and it was known as the Cotton Estates and International Exposition. He went down with some employees, and they set up a number of his buggies and put them on display. The exposition lasted for 4 months, and when it ended, Tyson and Jones Buggy Company was issued the gold medal as having the best display of the entire exposition. Now this helped with sales. You put them on a sales brochure. We won a gold medal, and that proceeded to us. By now they were making 3,000 buggies a year. This is astronomical. Now what he had done also was he wanted to look to expand the business operation plant-wise. So in 1898 he built a 3-story building that was made of brick, and from there he also installed another building, was built, which basically was the steel part of it, the iron part of it, where they were making the forgers and also making stampings for the various parts, the metal parts of the company, and also where they had the woodworking, where they were building the actual parts needed to create a wagon. In 1893, John B. Tyson I passed away. His son, I should say his grandson, took over the job. He became vice president, as I said, and so the company continued to operate. The president of the company was W.T. Jones, and he looked again to modernize. In 1895, the problem he had was there was a major fire, and it destroyed the 3-story building. Well, immediately what he did was he collected his insurance. It was a $20,000 loss. He got paid $7,000 for the loss, and he immediately went to build even a larger building, which was 4 stories high and had a complete basement. Things were really rolling along. The problem was in 1905, when the fire came and destroyed the 3-story building, he built this new building, and the following year he built another building on top of, adjacent to that. Now, when he took over day-to-day operations way back in 1873, and even before that, when he got back from the Civil War, he had his house built on the company property, where the upstairs is where he lived and the bottom is where he conducted his office. From there, after his first wife died in 1887, he met and married another woman
And in 1880 he had his house built, and they moved into that off-site. Now, never let one disaster hold him back. When he built the new building, he had electricity installed in it. And this meant that he went to electric powered tools versus steam powered. It's more efficient. He didn't have to run all these cables around and all these winches and whatever else he had to do to get the power from the steam engine over to where they needed the tools. So by here he could just plug them in and he had the tools running. In 1905 he was elected to be the vice president of the Buggy Association. In 1907, to give them more flexibility in being able to ship their products out, they built a railroad from the plant in Carthage down to Pinehurst, where it would connect with either the Seaboard Air Railway in Aberdeen or going west to the Southern Railroad. So now he could go east and west and connect with any railroads in the eastern part of the United States. It just further allocated resources to ship his products out. On November 29th, 1910, William T. Jones passed away. He had been ill for several months and declining health, and it was unfortunate, but his life ended. And this ended the actual era of the Tyson and Jones Buggy Company, where Thomas Tyson I and W.T. Jones were running the operation. Thank you for watching. Hello again, I'm back. And this session of the presentation is the Tyson and Jones Company after the death of W.T. Jones' era. After Jones passed away in November of 1910, the Tyson and Jones Buggy Company carried on with T.B. Tyson II as president. In 1911, there were a fire suppression system installed consisting of sprinklers and a water tower that was built using water that was pumped from a creek that went behind where the buildings were located. In 1914, Tyson presented a publication that the company had $150,000 in assets, in cash. Not bad for a company that was saved by a $3,000 investment from Jones in 1865. With the death of T.B. Tyson II in 1924, the company was sold to a group of people including John R. McQueen and Henry A. Pierce Jr. In August that year, the company was reorganized and the plan was to get more investors and more capital. The company purchased new machinery and, in addition, continuing to build buggies. The plan included the manufacturing of more furniture. In 1925, the company expanded to add manufacturing of truck bodies and the repainting of cars and reupholstery of automobile interiors. In 1927, the company showed
an increased demand for furniture. In 1928, a new president was installed by the name of Colin G. Spencer Jr. He announced that the manufacturing of buggies would be terminated. The last buggy was sold to Neil S. Blue from Rayford in 1929. The 80-year-old stated that he would never own or drive an automobile. 1929, the Depression started, and the company was no longer able to pay the loans out that it had taken to purchase the new machinery. As a result, it went bankrupt and into receivership and was sold at auction on May 8, 1929. Out of the sale of the auction, the company was sold again to a businessman from High Point, and the name of the company was changed to the Carthage Furniture Manufacturing Company. It was sold again in 1931 to J.V. Wilson, and the company name was changed again to Wilson Manufacturing Company. The business failed in a couple of years, and the company was sold again to Vance B. Sharp in 1940. He was the owner of the Carthage Weaving Company. The company entered into a contract with the federal government to make military web gear and camouflage netting and tarpaulins. In addition to that, the company also made tennis court nets, hammocks, and fishing nets. It also did dyeing of cloth material. The Carthage Weaving Company went under after the end of the war. The Carthage Weaving Company purchased the Carthage Railroad that ran from Carthage to Cameron. The railroad was abandoned in 1948, and the rails were pulled and sold for scrap. The Carthage Weaving Company didn't last much longer and went into receivership in 1949. An auction was held, and the plant and equipment was sold to the Greensboro Manufacturing Company for $75,000. The company assigned ownership to Victor Levy and Jesse Cocchino. On August 24, 1954, they sold a building to the Wright Knit Hosiery Mill, and Wright was spelled W-R-I-G-H-T. Again, the plant was sold on December 15, 1958 to the McDonald brothers. They opened up the Carthage Building Supply Company business, and in December 1958 the building was purchased by Allen McDonald, and it was used as a storage facility for building supplies. This happened, and it continued to operate until 1974, when the owner abandoned the building. On February 13th, 1976, a fire started and destroyed 4 of the remaining buildings. The only remaining building after that fire was the office building, which was built in 1906 and still exists to this day. In 2022, a Southern Pines Brewing Company was given a grant of $600,000 to refurbish the building and turn it into a brewery and restaurant. This, however, is not the end of the story. In 1989, the first Buggy Festival in Carthage was held to commemorate the Tyson and Jones Buggy Company. It consisted of a parade of the old buggies and acts, food for sale. It was basically like a small carnival. It has been held annually every May on a Saturday since. In 2001, the Carthage Museum was opened at 202 Rockingham Road in Carthage. I had the pleasure of visiting this place, and it is full of memorabilia of the history of Carthage. And it was part of that history is there are 3 of the original Tyson and Jones buggies on display, as well as historical information about the previous owners and their lives. While the Tyson and Jones Buggy Company no longer exists, it is not to be forgotten. William Thomas Jones was a remarkable individual, a man who, born as a slave, was emancipated, was educated, and went on to be the part owner of the Tyson and Jones Buggy Company. He was a good man. He was a church Sunday school teacher. He invested in his employees. He helped get them to do the best they could. When there was no bank available, he was the one who set out mortgages for his employees so that they could build a house for themselves and their families and make a home. He's a man to be admired, and it is surprising that those that believe in civil rights have not paid more attention to this man and his life. He's a man that showed when obstacles exist, you overcome those obstacles and you turn around and turn lemons into lemonade. This draws this presentation to a close. Thank you for watching. So what happened to the buildings of the Tyson and Jones Buggy Company after the bankruptcy was declared in 1929? Out of the sale at the auction, the company was sold again to a group of businessmen from High Point, and the name of the company was changed to the Carthage Factory Manufacturing Company. It was sold again in 1931 to J.B. Wilson, and the company name was changed again to the Wilson Manufacturing Company. This business failed in a couple of years because of the Depression. In 1940, J.B. Wilson sold the company to the Van B. Sharp,
he was the owner of the Carthage Weaving Company. The company entered into a contract with the federal government to make military web gear, camouflage netting, and tarpaulins. The company also made crab nets, tennis court nets, and hammocks. It also did cloth dyeing. In 1945, the Carthage Weaving Company purchased the Carthage Railroad that ran from Carthage to Cameron. The railroad was abandoned in 1948, and the rails were pulled up and sold for scrap. Carthage Weaving Company didn't last much longer. It went into receivership in July of 1949. The auction was held, and the plant and its equipment were sold to Greensboro Manufacturing Company for $75,000. The company assigned ownership to Victor Levy and Jesse Canero. On August 24, 1954, they sold the building to Wright Knit Hosiery Mill. Again, the plant was sold on December 15, 1958, to the McDonald brothers. They operated up as the Carthage Builder Supply business, and in December of 1958, the building was purchased by Allen McDonald to be used as a storage facility for building supplies. It was operated until 1974 when the owner abandoned the building. On February 13, 1976, a fire destroyed 4 of the remaining buildings. The only remaining building after the fire was the office building built in 1906. In 2022, the Southern Pines Brewing Company was given a grant of $600,000 to refurbish the building and turn it into a brewery and restaurant. This is not the end of the story. The first annual Buggy Festival was held on May 20th, 1989. It was such a success, it has been held annually in May every year since. The festival has a parade of Tyson and Jones buggies, food entertainment acts, games for the kids, and did I mention food? In 2001, the Carthage Museum was opened on 202 Rockingham Street in Carthage. I visited the museum, and it was packed with artifacts and historic files containing the history of the people and events which had taken place in Carthage. There was also a display of 3 of the original Tyson and Jones buggies from various years of production. In 2002, the historic marker was dedicated to the Tyson and Jones Buggy Company was placed on McReynolds Street. While Tyson and Jones Buggy Company and W.T. Jones are gone, however, they have not been forgotten. W.T. Jones was a man to be admired. In the era of pre-Civil War South and into the Jim Crow era, W.T. Jones refused to be identified by his race. While he always considered himself white, even though he was of mixed race, he treated himself with respect, and he treated those around him with the same respect. When faced with obstacles, he's always turned lemons into lemonade. He was possibly the only black man to serve as an officer in the Confederate Army. Remember that if you were any part black in the South at that time, you were considered black. Of all of the Civil War prisoners, and there were tens of thousands of them, he was the only recorded POW on either side who was able to make a small fortune while a POW, which he used to restore the Tyson and Jones Buggy Company, which in turn restored his adopted hometown. He gave back much more than he was given. W.T. Jones was a man to be admired, and his life set an example of the way a person should live their life. It's very surprising that the civil rights leadership has never given him his due.